Operation Epic Fury began on February 28th. 13 American service members have been killed. More than 400 have been wounded. The operation has destroyed more than 85% of Iran's defense industrial base, obliterated its navy, 150 warships across 16 classes, every submarine sunk, neutered its air force from between 30 to 100 daily sorties to zero, and razed its nuclear infrastructure. A ceasefire went into effect on April 8th. The 2-week ceasefire deadline expired April 22nd. President Trump extended it, citing an Iranian leadership that is, in his words, seriously fractured and needing more time to produce a unified peace proposal. Peace talks scheduled for Islamabad were canceled when Iran refused to show. The U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports remains in effect. The operation is not over. And Senate Democrats on April 22nd, one day after the ceasefire extension, forced their 5th war powers vote since the conflict began. The motion to discharge, sponsored by Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, would have directed the president to remove United States armed forces from hostilities within or against Iran unless explicitly authorized by a declaration of war or a specific authorization for use of military force. It failed, 46 to 51. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky was the only Republican to vote for it. Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania was the only Democrat to vote against it. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Democrats will continue to force war powers votes every week until Republicans see reason and help end this war. Senator Jim Risch of Ohio, chairman of Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said something during the early weeks of this campaign that this show put on record and that I'm putting on record again. He said, "You'll notice that Democrats are the only entity on the planet who are helping the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the military arm of the Iranian regime that has spent decades killing Americans in every theater it could reach." Risch said Democrats are helping them. I think he's right. And I'm going to spend the next between 20 and 30 minutes explaining exactly why, with the updated record of the last 60 days in front of us.
Courage, compassion, faith, freedom, truth. Welcome to Courage in the Darkness with your host, Philip Roberts. It's time to awaken America.
Senate Democrats are presenting their War Powers campaign as principled constitutional oversight. The constitutional argument underneath it is real, and it deserves honest engagement before it's rejected. Because the tension between the president's authority as commander-in-chief and Congress's enumerated power to declare war is a genuine structural feature of the American system, not a partisan invention. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing forces to hostilities and limits those hostilities to 60 days without congressional authorization. The 60-day clock ran out on May 1st. Democrats are correct that the constitutional question is real. But here is where the principled oversight argument collapses on contact with what Democrats are actually doing. Senator Baldwin received a classified briefing on the operation. Her stated objection is that she was not convinced of the imminent threat threshold for unilateral presidential military authority had been met. That is a legal argument. A senator who genuinely held that conviction and genuinely wanted to exercise oversight responsibly would press that argument through the classified channels and secure committee processes that exist precisely for this purpose. Channels that do not provide Iran's remaining leadership with a real-time window into American political divisions about the operation. Baldwin is not doing that. She's sponsoring public floor resolutions. Schumer is promising weekly public votes. Senator Markey is issuing press releases calling Operation Epic Fury a wasteful, unjust, and useless mission, while negotiations are ongoing and American sailors are enforcing a naval blockade in the Persian Gulf. Public. While the operation is active, while the naval blockade is running, while Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the man killed in the opening strikes, reportedly gravely wounded himself and in hiding, is watching every signal from Washington for evidence that American political resolve is fracturing. The reason the Senate has classified briefings and secure committee sessions is that adversaries listen and they use what they hear. That principle does not become optional when the party out of power believes the operation was a mistake. Schumer said Democrats would be doing Trump a favor by forcing him to end the war. Let that framing sit for a moment. 13 Americans are dead, hundreds more are wounded, the naval blockade is holding, peace negotiations are at an impasse, Iran canceled the Islamabad talks, and the Senate minority leader's argument is that forcing the commander-in-chief to stand down the operation is doing him a favor. If you can't see the gap between that framing and the interest of 13 families who buried their service member this spring, that framing has done its work on you. Senate Democrats, presenting themselves as principled constitutional restrainers of executive military authority, are hoping the historical record of their party's relationship with Iran has been sufficiently buried by time. It is not. The Obama administration's Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal, handed the Iranian regime $150 billion in sanctions relief, including $1.8 billion in cash flown to Tehran on pallets at night. That money, which Secretary of State Kerry acknowledged could flow to Iranian proxies and terrorism, went directly into the infrastructure that Iran has been using to fight this war. The IRGC's ballistic missile program, the drone manufacturing capacity, the proxy networks in Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria that spent years killing Americans and American allies. The Obama administration funded the war we are now fighting to end. Democrats who voted for the JCPOA who celebrated it as a diplomatic achievement, who attacked Trump for withdrawing from it in 2018. Those same Democrats are now filing war powers resolutions to protect what remains of the regime that deal empowered. Kerry himself, after leaving office, reportedly held back-channel meetings with Iranian officials during the Trump administration, advising them on how to wait out the maximum pressure campaign in the expectation that a change in administration would produce a return to the deal's framework. That's the former Secretary of State conducting unauthorized diplomacy with a hostile foreign government to undermine the sitting president's foreign policy. The Logan Act exists for exactly that reason. Nobody was prosecuted. The Democrats filing these resolutions spend years arguing that the Iranian regime was a responsible actor with whom the United States could reach durable agreements. They were wrong. The regime that begged for the ceasefire and then canceled the Islamabad follow-on talks is the same regime their party spent years protecting from the maximum pressure that was actually working. That record does not disqualify them from making the constitutional arguments, but it does disqualify them from making those arguments as if they have no stake in the outcome beyond pure principle. 5 war power votes in 54 days. Every single one of them failed. The vote totals have been remarkably stable, hovering around 46 to 51 across multiple attempts, with Rand Paul on one side and John Fetterman on the other, as the sole cross-party votes each time. The votes are not moving the needle on authorization. They're not producing classified accountability. They are producing press releases, cable news segments, fundraising emails, and most importantly, from the IRGC's perspective, a daily public signal that American political opposition to the operation is organized, sustained, and looking for the fracture point. Senator Duckworth's War Powers Resolution, Senator Kane's War Powers Resolution, Senator Murphy's public promises to call up a War Powers vote every single day, Senator Markey's press release calling the operation wasteful and useless. These are not oversight documents filed in classified channels. They're public communications designed to generate political benefit for the opposition party. The medium is the message. And the message, broadcast in real time to the same Iranian leadership watching for any sign that American resolve is limited, is that nearly half of the United States Senate believes this operation should stop. That is the most useful piece of intelligence Iran's remaining military commanders could receive. Jim Rish's observation about who is being helped stands without further embellishment. The IRGC's best available outcome at this stage of the conflict is an American political fracture that constrains the operation, signals limited resolve, and creates space for Iran to reconstitute. The Democratic floor's strategy is the action that most directly serves that outcome. Risch described a consequence. The consequence is the same, regardless of intent. 13 American service members have been killed in Operation Epic Fury. They put on the uniform, deployed to a hostile theater, and gave their lives in an operation their commander-in-chief determined was necessary for American security. That is the ground-level reality beneath every procedural argument being made in the Senate right now. The political debate about war powers and the 60-day clock and congressional authorization, these are important debates that deserve serious engagement. May 1st was the deadline. It was real. And Congress's oversight role is real. But the mechanism for that oversight, the mechanism that respects the lives of the service members currently deployed, is classified briefings, secure committee sessions, and confidential consultation between the branches, not weekly public floor votes timed for news cycles, not press releases calling the operation useless while the naval blockade is running, not public comparisons to the Iraq War designed to erode public support at 36% approval while the operation is still active. The senators filing these resolutions have a constitutional right to do all this. What they do not have is an exemption from the moral accounting that comes with exercising those rights in ways that could extend the conflict, embolden the adversary, and put additional Americans at risk. If the naval blockade holds and Iran comes to the table, the war powers votes will have produced their clips and their fundraising emails and nothing more. If the strategy signals to Iran's fractured leadership that waiting out American political will is a viable option, that Schumer's weekly votes are eroding the resolve behind the blockade, then the consequences will be borne by the people in uniform, not by the senators. That asymmetry is the moral weight the resolutions do not acknowledge. We acknowledge it here. 5 war powers votes, 13 dead Americans, a ceasefire extended because Iran's leadership is too fractured to produce a unified peace proposal. A naval blockade holding in the Persian Gulf while mine clearance vessels move toward the Strait of Hormuz. Peace talks canceled because Iran won't show. And Senate Democrats promising to force a 6th vote next week. The question this show keeps asking, and I will keep asking, is the one the cameras never ask. What did you do while Americans were in the field? The answer for 60 days of Senate Democratic leadership is that they forced 5 public votes designed to generate political benefit, issued press releases calling the operation wasteful and useless, and promised to keep doing it weekly until Republicans break. That answer will be on the record, and it should stay there. The men and the women in that theater did not sign up to have their operation relitigated on the Senate floor every week. They signed up to serve. They deserve a political class that conducts whatever oversight it believes is constitutionally required through the mechanisms that do not broadcast American political divisions to the adversary in real time. 13 of them are not coming home. The least their colleagues in the Senate can do is honor that sacrifice by doing their constitutional duty through the channels that do not cost additional American lives. Stand with us, support the mission, refuse the silence. Find us at titdusa.com and the Stand Against the Silence campaign. I'll see you next time.